Me and my family moved to Phoenix, Arizona from Tucson last year. We were used to living in tightly compacted neighborhoods with community pools and that whole lot. You know the deal. Little to no backyard, every house has the same floor plan, etc. Then one day my parents decided they had enough of cramped city life and decided they wanted to live on a horse property up north in Phoenix, closer to family and more job opportunities, among plenty more reasons. I'm not sure quite exactly what the main motivation was though. The property they bought was pretty much built to house horses and sheep. I wouldn't call it a farm, but it felt a lot like one. It was 3 acres of huge shade trees, dirt, and the occasional grass patch. It was pressed right up on South Mountain, high up enough so that at night you could see the Phoenix city lights. The house itself was luxurious enough, 2 stories, Spanish hacienda style, kind of old looking. I don't know much about the house's history other than the previous owners were a flamboyant retired couple who decided Arizona heat wasn't their cup of tea. Upon moving in on the first night, we encountered a pack of coyotes sniffing around the property line and a scorpion on the kitchen counter, so I don't quite blame them. I liked the house, I guess. It felt a bit barren and lonely at first, but a few months in we had 4 horses, plenty of goats, and even a friendly chicken named Helena. The property was bustling, to say the least. I liked my school, home life was boring, and our family was okay. I settled in quickly. The only thing that may have hinted towards a bit of oddness was 6 months after we moved in, my dad worked as a truck driver for some time and had to go up into Ohio for a few weeks. He returned with a female Belgian dog. The dog was already a little old, about 8 years old actually, and acquired right off of an Amish community, but that was a good thing, because it meant she was already experienced with animals. We named her Zasha, and found that she settled in quickly. She was pretty strange. She was very hasty about coming inside the first few nights. We assumed it was because she wasn't allowed to where she came from, but even as she got comfortable slipping in and out of the house, she preferred sleeping on the back porch, despite how hot it got in the summer. Though she adored running around the property and around the central parts of the house where most of the commotion would happen, she had a horrid fear of my bedroom. She was already reluctant about going upstairs in general, yet sometimes followed anyway. However, my bedroom was hell for her. We even one day tried to shove her in and she promptly dug her claws in the floor and scrambled away. One night, when we were hosting a small get-together with the family, we noticed Zasha was missing. The Arcadia door was wide open the whole time though, so we just presumed she was out mingling with the animals to hide away from all the people. We ignored the situation and continued on chatting and eating until all of a sudden there was a loud bang, followed by a symphony of vicious barking and growling. I've heard Zasha bark and growl plenty of times, warning signs to strangers, protecting her food from insistent goats, even at coyotes, and all had sounded downright intimidating at the time, but this took the cake. She sounded absolutely ready to kill. It made everyone promptly freak out and rush upstairs, only to find Zasha was directing her attack at something in my doorway. We turned the corner expecting to find a snake or maybe even an intruder, but instead we find nothing. Absolutely nothing. Thin air. We didn't know what to attribute the loud bang to, but my family preferred to just ignore that and called Zasha old and delusional. We had to rip her away from the doorway and shove her outside, even though she clawed urgently at the door as if she felt she needed to defend us from something. It scared me, but I avoided speaking up about it under the fear that my family would laugh at me and call me paranoid. Flash forward to now. I'd just gotten home from school. The house was relatively empty as both parents were working and my siblings had sports practice. Zasha was sprawled out in the dirt under a tree, eyeing up the goats and wagging her tail when a baby goat sniffed her. I knocked on the screen door to grab her attention, not quite wanting to be alone in the house when I had a dog. Obediently, she sprinted towards the door and leaped through before making herself cozy on the cool tile in the kitchen. I'd already grabbed a Sprite from the refrigerator and was ready to throw myself down on the couch and turn on the TV, when suddenly there was a loud bang. Zasha immediately jumped up and began growling, pointing her body like an arrow at the staircase as if it were prey. I immediately felt chills run through my whole body. Forgive me if I sound a little too paranoid, but I'm 110 pounds, 5'3", female, who has little to no chance of surviving an attacker. Naturally, I bounded over to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find, convinced that if I was armed, I could maybe overpower the obvious intruder. Zasha beat me to investigating the situation, as she promptly ran straight up the stairs and left me in the dust. Fearing the worst for the slightly too confident dog, I ran up after her. To my complete shock, she bounded right into the room, heart set on once and for all devouring whatever it was she was so scared of. My room is quite large and has a walk-in closet with no doors, so you quite literally just have to walk in. Therefore, it surprised me when she dove straight into the back end of my closet and began sniffing and snorting insistently on the wall behind the rack of clothes, even scratching. Okay, maybe a mouse is in the wall or something. I know, it doesn't explain the loud bang, but I was ready to try and rationalize anything. Still curious though, I walked up to where Zasha was snorting around and hesitantly pulled back the rack of clothes. There was a square cut into the wallpaper. It was door-shaped and could fit an average person, but was short enough that said person would have to crawl to enter. I at first did not realize it was a door. It doesn't really look like one, rather just a perfectly aligned tear in the wallpaper. But upon running my fingers along it and force shoving one in, I found it flopped forward and fell to the floor with a heavy clap. A cutout in my wall, all right. There was a light source from somewhere inside this crawl space, I guess. I am the biggest scaredy cat, and would probably always live in a scary movie because of how I absolutely nope out of any potentially dangerous situation, which is exactly what I did. I got a peek of what looked like a room and bolted. I raced down the stairs and out the back door so quickly, my thigh actually began to cramp up. The first thing I did was race to the safety of the animals. Yeah, they can't help me, but other living things are comforting, and I grabbed my phone out of my pocket. Zasha followed me, a little more slowly and peering behind her shoulder every few seconds, as if she knew exactly what was happening and was more fed up than frightened. I dialed my mom immediately, but she answered with a, "I'm at work, sweetheart. You know not to call me here. I get off in 15 minutes. I'll call you back. Love you. Bye." I tried next to call my brother and my sister, but both phones were turned off. I felt like ripping out my hair. I contemplated dialing 911, but what for? I needed emergency assistance because I found a crawl space in my house? In the broad daylight, and with horses staring at me curiously like nothing happened, it felt ridiculous to freak out so much over something as simple as that. I finally worked up the courage to at least check what was in there after 5 minutes or so. When I went back up, flanked by Zasha, who no longer looked angry but rather curious, I found everything to be exactly the same. The cutout of my wall still sitting neatly on the floor, and the bright illuminated hole still standing patiently. Slowly, I crouched down and peered through. Boxes. There were loads of them. This seemed pretty tame, and it seemed to be the only thing in there from my view. I would have never gone in there myself, but Zasha zipped right through when she realized I wasn't running away from it and began sniffing around in there. I tried calling her out, but she just looked at me over her shoulder like a disapproving mother-in-law and continued her quest for interesting scents. Feeling like she was never going to get out, I was faced with the reality that I'd have to crawl in and get her out myself. So I did. The room was so small that even as short as I am, I felt the ceiling brush my head every time I took a step. A few steps in, as I observed the stacks of cardboard boxes, I came across something. A blue sleeping bag. At first, I froze, absolutely positive some psycho was right behind me and was going to clamp the hole shut and lock me in for all eternity because I discovered their secret. But then I rationalized that maybe it was just more junk that happened to be spread out neatly on the floor coincidentally, so I worked up the courage to approach the sleeping bag. As more of it came into view, I noticed a small camera positioned neatly on top. Next to it was a jar of salted peanuts. I froze up again, but much more briefly this time. I crouched down and picked up the video camera. It was an old-style one, the one that had a little flip-out viewing screen. It turned on and had nearly full battery percentage. Just then I heard the front door slam and immediately bolted out of the room, camera in hand. It turned out it was just my mom, returning from work as promised. I immediately ran down to explain what happened desperately. She at first was skeptical, rolling her eyes and throwing around the word "really" a few times, before finally becoming convinced and following me up the stairs. She poked around in the room as well. We found the boxes to be full of normal attic junk. Old toys, figurines, blankets, and kitchen Tupperware. The sleeping bag and snacks were still there. When I presented her the camera, my mom, always the better thinker, quickly said we had to view what was on it. Grabbing a fire something cord, I had little to no education on stuff like this, and some other things, she hooked it up to our TV. The first tape was of the mountain, South Mountain to be exact. The cameraman was zoomed in on the mountain, recording the rows of red blinking lights on the antennas at the top of the mountain before zooming out and giving a view of the street. Our street. He walks for a bit before stopping and turning to zoom in on our neighbor's house. He views them for a while before continuing to walk. At one point, the cameraman even points the camera downwards and zooms in on his feet, which are covered in brown boots. The guy turns and finally his camera rests on our house. There's a sigh from the cameraman and then the clip ends. In the next one, it's daytime. The camera is in a parking lot. He walks confidently into a supermarket and begins browsing some watermelons towards the entrance silently. It's pretty boring, stretching out for a good 4 minutes or so, until suddenly he aims his camera up and zooms in on a cluster of people. It's unclear what he's focusing on until an elderly couple come into view. I recognize them immediately. They're the couple that lived on the property before we moved in. The cameraman keeps his camera aimed on them for the rest of the video. He moves with them, keeping a safe distance, but he never loses sight of them. He follows them through the whole store and peeks over aisles to get shots of them. Abruptly, the camera turns around to a store employee who taps the cameraman's shoulder angrily and inquires as to what exactly he is filming. The clip ends. The next is the first absolutely alarming tape. It starts out with the cameraman pointing downwards, shaking as the man walks. It's nighttime, and it's very obviously the side of our house. The cameraman stops as he reaches the kitchen window and aims his camera right through the window pane, where the couple are playing music loudly and sipping wine happily. They begin to playfully dance with each other as the old man talks about moving up towards Canada. The rest of the clip is merely watching them. For the next 5 clips, it's just the cameraman spying on them, in dental appointments, from their backyard, and at one point, the cameraman slips through the door when it's left unlocked, and he begins poking around their items. At one clip, the first thing seen is the front of the house, the man waiting with a ragged breath in presumably a bush. It's nighttime again, and he's very obviously excited for something. For the first time, we hear him talk as he whispers, "Come on." It's unclear what exactly he's waiting for until the old couple come outside to their lawn. The cameraman jumps up from a crouching position, but then the couple is joined by 3 other people, a couple and their child. They're all carrying drinks and settle themselves in lawn chairs, clearly planning on spending the rest of the night lounging about outside. The cameraman practically slumps and sits down again. He watches them for 10 minutes until his camera points downwards. He has a gun laying neatly in his lap. The last clip the cameraman has of the couple is when they're moving. The final moving trucks come to get the last of their furniture, and the clip pretty much consists of the couple standing around outside, complaining about how hot it is and barking orders at movers. The next clip is of a real estate agent. I recognize her immediately too. She is the one who sold us the property. She's walking around confidently, surveying the stables and the exterior of the house. She opens her cell phone and makes a call to somebody about how dingy the place is and how she'll never sell the dump without some major flipping, and looks pleased when it seems she wins an argument. She then leaves, and the clip ends. The next clip is of me. This time it's positioned from inside my room. The cutout door is obviously taken away, and the cameraman pokes his camera lens through the rack of my clothes discreetly to film me. I'm walking around angrily, arguing on the phone with my dad about how he never comes straight home when he gets back in town. I remember that day clearly. I finally hang up on my dad and throw the phone on my bed before walking out, and the clip ends. The next clip is of that day Zasha freaked out. The cameraman is positioned at the top of the stairs, lying down and trying his best to discreetly film us through the railing. Zasha is lying down on the floor. The cameraman zooms in on her, then back out on the rest of the family. He seems to zoom in on everything. The food, each of our faces, and even at one point on my mom's ass. This goes on for an agonizingly long time, before he suddenly accidentally drops his camera on the next step, creating the loud bang we heard. Even dropped, the camera still records Zasha jumping up and racing up to the noise. The cameraman scurries to collect his camera and throws himself through my closet and into the room. Zasha follows him straight in, barking and growling angrily. He tries to wave her away, but she merely snarls at him and tries to snap at his hand. With no choice left, he turns and grabs a small elephant figurine lying in a box and throws it at her. It hits her forehead and is enough to scare her into backing out of the room. She still barks insistently at the doorway. The figurine slides under my dresser, and when the cameraman hears us clambering up the stairs, he plugs the hole with the cutout and waits with a ragged breath. Our muffled voices, concerned and confused, are heard in the room. The cameraman listens until we shrug and drag her back downstairs. The clip ends. It's not the last clip. There's tons more with plenty of recent dates, but we didn't bother to watch them. My mom called the police and a bunch of cop cars arrived. I spent a great deal of time in the corner, hours actually, as the cops questioned everyone. My siblings came home and were pretty angry at the sight of police and accused me and my mom of overreacting. They just vaguely heard snippets of us discovering a crawl space, but I hardly care if they understood. I'm still trying to process everything myself. I'm just trying to understand what caused the bang that made me find the room in the first place. Part of my previous job requirements involved doing bi-weekly inspections on HUD properties. A lot of these properties were in pretty unsafe neighborhoods. One in particular remains my least favorite house to this day. To start with, on my first visit, it was apparent that something had happened in this house. Someone had been making meth, or something had gone horribly wrong. A fire had occurred there, but there was no record of a fire with the previous insurance company. The neighbors said no fire had occurred, and the local fire department, or police, had never responded to a fire. I had my fair share of problems with broken windows, used condoms, the usual stuff you see in a neighborhood like this. Then, one afternoon, I pulled up in front of the house and started my inspection as I usually did, by walking around the house and going into the garage. Immediately, a car down the street started honking their horn. I thought it was weird, but this isn't the best neighborhood, so I just ignored it. This house had a garage that was built onto the back of the house, covering 2 bedroom windows. The windows looked down into the garage. There was no door from the garage into the house. In order to enter the garage, you had to go in through a single door on the left-hand side of the property, towards the back. I should also mention that the heating system of this house is such that all of the heat comes from the middle of the house, through a big open vent covered with a screen. The ductwork is gone, so when you look through the vent you can see into the crawl space. I go in the garage and I notice that the crawl space door is open. I look up and notice that one of the bedroom windows is open. I stop. They should both be closed. I stand there for what feels like forever and contemplate calling the police, but I'm in a hurry, so I just turn around, go back out the door, and lock it. I go into the front of the house. The car down the street is still honking its horn. I start my inspection as I usually do. Kitchen, living room, bathroom, bedroom number 3, bedroom number 1, and then I go to open the hallway closet in between bedroom number 1 in bedroom number 2. It won't open. I know I've opened it before. I'm turning the knob and pulling it and it will not open. I start to get a really weird feeling in my stomach. The car outside is still honking. I step over the big vent in the floor to go to bedroom number 2, and I look down to see a pair of eyes looking back at me. I look up, wipe my face, look back down, and they are gone. I ran straight out the front door into my car and locked the doors. The car stopped honking. This is what I think happened. When I got to the house, there were 2 people inside. The person honking the horn warned them that I got out of my car. One of them had time to jump out the window and into the garage, and then went into the crawlspace. The other one only had time to get in the closet. When I ran out of the house and the horn stopped, they were signaling that I was leaving. I returned to the property 2 weeks later to find the windows shut. The crawlspace door locked, but a broken window. I did not enter the house, but called the police instead. They found the closet doors shut again, and 4 officers were unable to open the door. Upon my return 2 weeks after that, the door opened with ease. I'm convinced someone was in the house with me on many of my visits. I just didn't know it. I was living in a nice condo building in Toronto on the 8th floor. The building had good amenities and I really loved the place. The apartment itself was nothing special. An awkwardly shaped living room, a big bedroom, a small kitchen, and a small bathroom. Also a huge balcony. In the bedroom, I had put my bed underneath the window, a couch and a TV on opposing walls, and the last wall, the one closest to the door, had 2 separate closets for the 2 people that are supposed to be sharing the bedroom. One is right next to the door. Then there's a dresser and the other closet on the other side of the dresser. The closets had sliding doors. The one closest to the door was almost entirely empty, save for a telescope I had stored in there and a couple of boxes of old textbooks, while the other had all of my clothes in it. The superintendent of the building lived on my floor. He was a bit of a creep. He would spend a ton of his time just sitting on a bench in the courtyard in front of the building and staring at nothingness. This sometimes went on for hours on end, without a word spoken to anyone who passed by. He was a decent-looking guy for his age, but he had a wife who was morbidly obese, at least 350 pounds. I barely saw her since she never left the place other than on the very rare occasion when he was too busy to walk the dogs, and she would have to do it. I've had the pleasure of sharing the elevator with her a few times, and she always smelled of extreme filth and walked around in pajamas with huge stains on them. One day, I was sleeping in since I had spent all night doing a problem set, and I heard really loud banging, which, for the longest time, I thought was happening in my sleep. My dog started barking and woke me up, so I realized it wasn't a dream. But by the time I realized it was coming from my door, I heard the lock turn and the door open. I just leapt out of the bed right away in nothing but briefs, wrapped my blanket around myself, and ran out of the bedroom to see what was happening. My super had just walked through the door, after having unlocked it with the key that he had taken from the management office downstairs. He typically has no access to the keys, but he explained that he was here to do a balcony inspection. The building was really strict about what we were allowed to have outside on the balcony, and there were annual balcony inspections to check for violations, so he had been given all the keys to check. The entire time he was over, he seemed to be really on edge. He was looking around the place constantly, like a distracted child. I walked him to the balcony and he went outside to check it out. I went in my room to put on some clothes, and then I returned to the balcony to see if he was done. He wasn't there anymore. He had left the apartment without saying he was leaving. I didn't think that much of it. I went to work later in the day and got home around 9 p.m. I'm an avid swimmer and I go swimming almost every night after work in my condo's pool, if there is no one else in there, at least. One wall of the pool room is made of glass and faces my building's yard, so you can see into the pool room. I got home and went upstairs to get my dog, and I went back out to walk him. While walking him, I looked through the glass to see if the pool was empty, and it was. So when my dog finished peeing, I brought him back upstairs, locked the door, and went to the pool for a swim. I was in the pool for about 40 minutes, I would say. About halfway through, I noticed a dark outline walking by the window a few times in a row, casually glancing toward the pool. By this time, it was between 9:30 and 10 p.m. and fully dark outside. The pool room is well illuminated, so it is almost impossible to see anything but faint outlines if you look out into the yard. Almost all you see is reflected light from the glass. Because of this, I couldn't see who it was that was pacing back and forth, but it made me a bit nervous. Either way, I finished my swim, used the sauna for a bit, took a shower in the change room, and headed upstairs. I put my key in the lock and turned it to unlock my front door. The lock did not click. It was already unlocked. I found this extremely weird. I may have only gone downstairs to the pool, but I was 100% sure I had locked the door behind me. I absolutely never leave my door unlocked if my dog is home. I am extremely protective of him. I turned the handle and opened the door. My dog always waits for me right in front of the door if I am not home, so he can attack me and jump all over me as I return. However, my dog was not there. My heart stopped, and I started shouting his name. I heard panicked barking coming from the general direction of my bedroom. I headed to the bedroom to see where my dog was. While I couldn't see him, I heard the barking continue from one of my two closets. The sliding door was fully closed, so my dog could not have gotten in, yet I clearly heard his voice from inside. I rushed to the closet and opened the door. He leapt out and continued barking like crazy. I was still a bit shocked by what was happening, so I just stood in one spot in front of the closet, trying to figure out what's going on and how my dog could have gotten inside the closet. Then, my ears picked up on something in between my dog's barks. There was a barely audible wheezing laugh coming from the other closet in the room. My heart dropped way past my stomach, and I held my dog's muzzle shut so that he would stop barking for a second. The low-volume cackle continued, and I heard someone begin to move from inside the closet. My mind kicked into self-preservation mode. To get out of the room, I would have to walk right past that closet. The first thing that came to mind was to shove the dresser, which was between the two closets, forward and block the closet doors, then grab my dog and run out of the place like a bat out of hell. I didn't go to the elevator. I went straight to the stairs and ran down as fast as I could, still hugging my dog. I got to the security desk in lightning speed and shouted for them to call the police, that there was someone in my place. Then I collapsed on one of the couches in my lobby, wrapped around my dog, and caught my breath. The security guards are required to wait for the police for anything that could be deemed a serious situation, so we did not go back to the apartment until the police arrived. When they got there, they went ahead upstairs while I still waited in the lobby. 10 to 20 minutes later, they returned and said that if anyone had been there, that they were now gone. They asked me everything that happened and wrote down all the information. They noted that when they had gone in, the sliding door of the closet I told them to check had been fully open. We went back upstairs so they can write some notes on the layout of the place to go with my story. And we noted that the dresser I had shoved in front of the closet was still partially in front of the closet, but now at an angle, as if shoved from the inside of the closet to clear the way. There was no sign of forced entry, so they asked me if I knew anyone that had a key to my place, or if I had let someone borrow a key and they may have made a copy of it. I told them about the fact that the superintendent currently had all the keys to the units due to the balcony inspections. They went to his place to talk to him. I, of course, was not present for their talk, but when they came back downstairs, they said that his wife vouched for the fact he had been home all night. The next day, more police came and reviewed all the security camera footage from the elevators and all of the building's exits. They deduced that the person definitely did not use the elevator to get away, since there was no one on camera between the time I ran down and the time the police arrived, nor did they leave the building within the next hour. There were no people in the footage seen leaving the building by the back exits, and the security guard is at the front, so he would recognize someone who doesn't live in the building. I was fully convinced that it was the super, but there wasn't anything I could really say, given that his wife had provided him with an alibi. The management office got the keys back the next day after all the balcony inspections were finished, but I could not stop conjuring freaky scenarios in my head, such as the super having copied my key while he had it. I gave my landlord 1 month notice, and I gave my dog to my parents for that month so that I would never have to leave him home alone again. For that last month, I locked my bedroom from inside every time I slept. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you're notified of future updates. Thank you to David Romero for the fantastic thumbnail artwork he did for this video. You can find links to him in the description. Thanks guys.